Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. With TBC confirmed, it's about time we did a little bit of a class update. Let's take a look back at each class in the Burning Crusade, their performance overall, and hopefully help you make your choice moving forwards. We will be looking at what's new in terms of talents and abilities, leveling, PvE, who's the new king of the meta, PvP has much changed, and tier sets which actually exist for every specialization now. And through this I hope to answer, is your class any better now? And today we have the other half of the new race class combo to come with the Burning Crusade. If you think Shamans are going to be hype on the Alliance side, wait till you see how many Paladins there will be on the Horde. And not just because it's a new class either, people, it turns out, to like elves a lot. And well, Blizzard were very much onto this fact too.
What's exciting about the Blood Elves is they're kind of the first pretty race that the Horde has gotten. A lot of the Horde characters are very monstrous, which turn off a lot of players. A certain demographic only likes to play really attractive looking characters, so the Blood Elves will bring a prettier face to the Horde.
But I don't think even they could have predicted how swaying a pretty Horde race would truly be over time. But we aren't here to fawn over elves. We're here to talk the Paladin. Paladins have without a doubt come a very long way from Classic, being considered a class with a very narrow scope of viability within any competitive scene. Blizzard finally gave them the tools to escape another 2 years of wearing a blue dress. They fleshed out and really made the other two specs that had been so long neglected by the majority of the community have some real tangible strengths. This is a class with a huge amount of depth, so we better make a start. You know the drill by now. First up, what's new? Baseline, and then we'll get onto the spec specifics afterwards. Righteous Defense, a taunt. The mad lads at Blizzard actually gave Paladins a taunt. This was the key tanking mechanic protection was ever so desperately missing in Classic that simply just made them struggle enormously in raid content. Sure, there was the whole Blessing a King spam that actually did good consistent threat, but if a DPS rips it off you, well, you don't have a button to instantly get the target back onto you. Righteous Defense is a little different from your average taunt too. In fact, most of the time it's just better. It's actually cast on a friendly target, taunting 3 enemy targets off them at once, and it has a 40-yard range too, so if it's melee range on a friendly target, well, everybody would have to be sitting on top of the tank. You'll want to have a target of target macro to just allow you to hit taunt and not need to mess about trying to find who the mob's going after. Regardless though, this is a real game changer for protection. Spiritual Attunement is a new passive that goes hand in hand with Righteous Defense to make Paladins a great tank. Pretty simple in how it works, 10% of friendly heals are given as mana, meaning the Paladin will have enough fuel in the tank to be able to press their buttons, even on longer boss fights. It only works on heals that actually gain you health as well. It used to work from overhealing for a period of time. People had Paladins in a group with a Shadow Priest and they could literally not go no matter how hard they tried. It has a lesser use for Ret too, which we'll get onto later. Avenging Wrath, aka Wings, the big iconic DPS cooldown for the Paladin. It's probably a little different from how you remember it, however. 30% extra damage, no bonus healing for 20 seconds. Also causes forbearance, so it's kind of an all-in type spell in PvP, since this debuff will stop the use of bubble. Also, it is a magic buff, so watch out for mages and spell steal. Even still, it's a great cooldown to stack with heroism, trinkets, potions, and gives your protection paladin a nice extra amount of threat generated for its duration. Crusader Aura, not quite as exciting as the other spells so far, but 20% extra mounted speed for you and your party. It doesn't stack with similar effects, however, like Riding Crop. It's something I guess you'll have a weak aura to say, remember to press the button when you mount. Turn Evil, I forgot this one existed to be honest, it's like an upgraded Turn Undead. Now works versus demons too, which is pretty handy since demons aren't too hard to find in Outland. And finally there are 2 new seals, Seal of Blood and Seal of Vengeance. So you know how both factions get Paladins and Shaman now. I'm guessing Blizzard wanted to keep a little something faction specific. Shamans get different flavours of heroism or bloodlust, but they both do the same thing, so no issues there. Seal of Blood and Vengeance, however, don't do the same thing. And all data from back in the day, from the likes of elitist jerks to people on fan servers perfecting and optimizing the Paladin, points towards Seal of Blood being better the majority of the time. But I'd like to carry on for now, and we can talk more about this in detail in the Ret part of PvE. Leveling wise, Paladin still does Paladin stuff for, well, quite a while, which is this. Spiritual Attunement actually has a rank learned very early on to make Prot more interesting even for low level dungeons, which is super nice. Once you are in Outland though, you have your Crusader Strike, most likely if you're Ret. You have your Exorcism, which is going to be seeing a lot of action and is a great, albeit rather expensive extra button to add some punch to your single target. AoE farming has become an even better option for Paladins now, providing you can get your hands on some nice spell power gear early on, due to their infinite AoE scaling through Consecration. Also, Protection Paladins are without a doubt the kings of smaller group content. I'm talking your frequent pulls of multiple mobs in heroic dungeons in Kara or in ZA. Their AoE threat is just the best and the most consistent. They have a ranged taunt and all the standard blessings you can expect from the Paladin. Solo leveling, they are somewhat improved upon Classic, but if you take the dungeon or group route as Prot, I think you're going to have a very good time. With that out the way, let's get on to the interesting stuff, PvE. Let's start with what most of the Paladin population will be playing at the moment, Holy. Now, playstyle wise, what Holy was good at in Classic is still what they're good at in TBC, and indeed has really become their niche over time. Very strong and efficient single target healing. Here is the type of spec you may see in PvE content, and it's very useful that Holy can easily fit all 3 talent upgrades for blessings into their standard build, those being Wisdom, Kings and Might. And I suppose I should mention that ideally you would like to have at least 3 Paladins in your raid group, solely for blessings if nothing else, because they offer such great bonuses overall. The main ones you want to see are Salvation, Kings and Might or Wisdom, and one Paladin can only do one type of blessing per player. Some classes of course like both Might and Wisdom, like Enhancement or Res, so there's some decision making to be had there. But just know that you'll have a job of making sure everybody has the right blessing running all the time, and don't worry, I'm sure they will let you know if they don't. Oh, and be glad you never had to deal with 5-minute lesser and 10-minute greater blessings. Their durations have thankfully been buffed up a little bit more. Anyways, talking about Holy, I guess the big news for this spec is Consecration is now baseline for Paladins. This is just such a great addition. I don't think there's a Paladin spec out there in Classic that doesn't aim to pick this talent up. It's just too useful to the class overall. We have some extra aura range from the aptly named Aura Mastery. Holy Shock cooldown has been halved, as well as given a much better spell damage coefficient as of a later patch. TBC is the real rise of the Shockadin, which we will definitely be talking about in PvP. Light's Grace and Holy Guidance are the real 2 talents that change your playstyle. In Classic you more or less just bash Flash of Light non-stop, because damage tends to be pretty bursty. Even if no one's taking damage, you just press the button. For Holy Palas, thanks to these 2 talents, it becomes much more attractive to just Holy Light and stack Intellect as high as you possibly can. Also, yes, down ranking is still a thing. Blizzard did try to nerf it, but I guess they didn't quite do a good enough job. Divine Illumination is your new end of tree talent, 50% reduced mana cost for 15 seconds, which is pretty strong and lets the Paladin be the mana efficient healer you are used to, which they sort of needed because Illumination gets nerfed. Pretty hard at that. This was the talent that made Paladins quite literally just not go in once you started to hit late game gear in Classic, especially stacking that up with world buffs. Here it's down to 60% mana refund, it used to be 100%, and yes, it was pretty overpowered as a passive effect. So now Paladins actually have a bit more of a mortal mana bar, which is a pretty big change, I guess. Next up, Protection. So as we've mentioned, Protection actually gets the tools it needs to be a real tank, but were they actually any good at it? Let's have a little look. To start off with, here's a very defense-oriented setup for content where you will be expecting to take some pretty heavy damage, 25-man raids pretty much. Reckoning changes, it's no longer this mysterious invisible buff that disappears when you mount up for unexplained reasons. This talent's always confused me a bit. Instead, it's like this: when you get hit by anything, you have a percentage chance for your next 4 swings to generate an extra attack, meaning it's a pretty decent 1-point wonder talent for most content. Protection scales very well as the expansion goes on through stamina stacking on talents like Sacred Duty, Combat Expertise, as well as a nice bit of extra damage reduction from improved Righteous Fury. Improved Holy Shield makes Paladin a lot more sturdy, very reminiscent of how improved shield block works for warriors. Extra charges, more threat, less damage incoming, and should have a very good uptime unless you're taking damage from a great number of enemies at once, as in over 12 attacks within the space of 10 seconds. Avenger's Shield, the iconic end of tree ability for the Paladin, though I'm betting it will be different to how you remember it because it has a 1-second cast time. Of course you can't dodge, block or parry whilst casting, and it will chain to 3 enemies nearby maximum. It also applies a daze, which is a 50% slow. So it's pretty much a good snap threat ability at the start of a fight, or to be used as a tool to pull mobs, which paladins were really missing in Classic. Just make sure you don't accidentally chain pull or the daze doesn't split up the mobs too much. As for the tanking performance for Protection Paladins, there are some great guides out there to really get stuck into the subject, but just to give you a brief mention, as they work very differently from other tanks. They have very few abilities with threat modifiers on them like the likes of Lacerate or Heroic Strike. The vast majority of their threat is more or less entirely from holy damage dealt. This means their itemization to build threat is how much spell damage can I put on without dying, whereas their defensive gearing can cut into that threat generation heavily, especially when you're aiming for defensive caps early on. This means protections are more often seen as off tanks to late game gearing. Saying that, it all depends on the content difficulty, and there's some content where the Protection Paladin feels too good to ignore, like basically the entire trash phase of Mount Hyjal or Morrogrim in SSC to name 2. And you know I can't just leave Prot there because they're a lot more than just a tank in TBC. They are now the best AoE farming or boosting class in the game, thanks to the AoE damage caps putting a stop to the tyranny of the mage, that is. Consecration wasn't AoE damage capped. Why? Dunno, but it wasn't. As for exactly what build you'll want, it's all about striking a balance. Where will be the best spots to farm? How is your gear? Are you not dying but you're going slow, or fast but you don't make the runs consistently? A more defensive build might look something like this. Key points are making sure that we go far enough into Ret to pit up Sanctity Aura. Ret Aura isn't worth it anymore due to how Consecration scales so exceptionally well, and you can even bubble and throw up a Holy Wrath if you are mass pulling or dead or demons too. Something along this line might even be good in dungeons due to its extra damage if you aren't at the risk of dying. Or maybe there's so little risk in the dungeon or boost you are doing, you can just go full on with some ridiculous spec and get as much damage as possible out of the class. You've heard of Prot Fury, but what about Prot Ret? Pretty much going deep enough into Ret for Vengeance, which means your crits increase holy and physical damage by 15% at 3 stacks, build stacks faster through Reckoning, more move speed from Pursuit of Justice, and with full Vengeance stacks that would be 25% more holy damage dealt. It sounds pretty good, or maybe just insta-die to anything because you're so squishy. It's just an idea, and it sounds like something that could be fun to try out. Well, that leaves us with one spec left, Retribution. So Rets in Classic were, you know, a little bit lower down, shall we say. And for TBC, they get some amazing buffs to make them a much more competitive class, and as we will see, bring some very strong raid-wide buffs too. All the same, they don't go from one of the bottom DPS to suddenly near the top. You need to wait one more expansion for that. They can, however, do some very respectable damage by later phases of the game too, with some more gear in their inventory, and assuming they are hitting a demon or undead, which are in no short supply. However, as with like a few other specs we've seen so far, they are largely more there for their utility, like your enhancement shamans or your boomkins. Blessing of Might now affects all attack power, not just melee. Improved Seal of the Crusader gives 3% crit against a target, making it a great raid-wide buff. Improved Sanctity Aura also gives members of your party a flat 2% extra damage. It's these combined reasons that a Ret is really nice to have about. Sanctified Judgments helps out with those mana issues, and Crusader Strike right at the bottom of the tree, an ability that oh so nearly made it into vanilla for Paladins but was replaced with the Seal and Judgment system. Not only another button to press for some nice damage, but also refreshes all judgments on the target, which is actually extremely useful, especially so your Holy Pally doesn't have to stop what they're doing to run over and melee the boss to keep their judgment running. So I guess I have to talk Seal of Vengeance versus Seal of Blood now, right? I did do a full video on it a while back, and I'll link that because there really is that much to talk about in the subject. Seal of Vengeance is what the Alliance gets, stacking a holy damage dot, where the judgment does more damage per stack, up to 5 stacks maximum. Horde got Seal of Blood that does bonus damage with each melee swing, and a small amount of reflect damage back to the Paladin. The Judgment does something pretty much the same along that line, which can actually be beneficial that they are taking damage, because they will then be able to restore mana through being healed thanks to spiritual attunement. So the short version is, since Seal of Blood scales off weapons, And with haste, that lower your swing timer, it will do overall more damage than the Alliance Rets will be able to do with their combination of Seal of Vengeance and Command. Seal of Vengeance is better for protection until later on in the game when this Librum comes out, and Alliance Rets still have Seal of Command, which is decent early on but does not compete with the haste scaling on Blood. Saying all of this, and as of writing this, Blizzard are testing seal twisting on the classic PTR, and I've heard you can twist different ranks of command, which, to be honest, doesn't quite sound right to me, so we'll have to see how things develop. So that is a brief look at PvE for you. How's the Paladin looking in PvP then? Well, first things first, protection specs, and this just goes for all of them actually, are not a thing in Arena, which I'm sure you are glad to hear if you've been playing Shadowlands from launch. They simply do not do any kind of damage which is threatening, they're just damage sponges themselves. As for the other two specs, they do see some representation though in a somewhat narrow variety of comps. But we've got to start with the meme because it really came to life in TBC, the Shockadin. Here is a random spec I threw together. I couldn't really find any resources online, so I've no idea how bad this is. Don't judge me, okay? So Holy Shock would have a 25% crit modifier baseline through Holy and Purifying Power, better spell damage scaling through Holy Guidance, and of course Sanctity Aura instead of Divine Illumination because we need damage, not mana efficiency. I also picked up Eye for an Eye, might as well be doing something useful between shock cooldowns. This is very much all in on the shock though, not what you would be seeing from a serious Holy PvP build, though Holy can actually do some surprising burst, very much at the expense of some of their larger cooldowns though. As for a Holy Pala that isn't living the meme, here's something more like it. Deep Holy with most of the standard talents that we saw for PvE, however new more PvP oriented choices include Unyielding Faith, Stoicism for some Dispel protection, and improved Concentration Aura and Spiritual Focus that make your spells immune to pushback as well. Improved Righteous Fury is decent when it doesn't get dispelled as it's a free 6% less damage taken. Holy Paladins are somewhat in a similar spot to Resto Shamans really. They need to cast to get their big heals off, though I'd argue despite their higher armor values they are overall more vulnerable to the metagaming in TBC. The real big strong cooldown bubble is pretty much their only consistent line of defense against getting bursted out, and even then Blizzard decided to give Priest the ability to remove this through Mass Dispel, and you aren't going to be seeing a shortage of Priest in PvP. As for arena representation, they see some play in twos, mainly with Warriors, which has more or less always been a good twos combo, with likes of Blessing of Freedom and even Sacrifice, which can't be ignored to prevent CC chains from setting up on the Paladin. Threes is where Holy can really struggle due to being easily shut down by aggressive comps, though they are seen in fives due to their overall great utility. Retribution also sees play in high-level arenas, though once again in quite a narrow scope of comps. You more or less don't see a Ret without a Shaman somewhere, usually Resto. Why? Wind Fury is why. Ret actually has very strong burst, it just needs a little bit of luck in the mix to truly pop off. Here's an idea spec, quite similar to your PvE Ret really, though with more points into protection for things like improved Hammer of Justice, 45-second cooldown on an instant cast 6-second stun is pretty good, as well as Repentance being another 6-second CC on a 20-yard range. Also, your seals are practically immune to dispels thanks to Stoicism and Sanctified Seals. Interestingly, there is another popular build that doesn't even take Crusader Strike. I know, madness. All this time waiting for this ability and not even using it? What's up with that then? Well, it's kind of mana intensive to use on cooldown for a start, and your damage is already burst reliant to begin with, so why not relive some of the Reckoning Dreams from Classic? This moves some of the talents from deep into the Ret tree back over to Protection, with any attack against you having a 10% chance to grant your next 4 swings an extra attack. If getting trained by the likes of a rogue, for example, that's going to be a pretty solid uptime. Combine a little Wind Fury totem and you can really delete people with cooldowns running. Speaking of cooldowns and about wings though, as mentioned earlier, they do cause forbearance, so make sure you're in a position to all in, or they can be quickly dispelled or leave you open to a hard swap whilst you can't bubble. Retribution sees a lot of play in 2s, mainly with Resto Shaman, same deal in 3s, along with a Warrior as the 3rd class. Paladins definitely have a few top tier arena teams, just not in as diverse of a cast of comps as other classes are. So let's finish this up on tier gear. If you can say one thing about Paladin tier gear, is there at least winners when it comes to appearances for all 3 raid sets. Tier 4, the Justicar Armor. Protection, more damage on a few seals. Funnily enough, Blood is the least useful one here for prot palas between both factions, but it's a nice bit of extra damage for the Alliance prots. 4 sets a bit more damage on Holy Shield, stacks up with your talents. Not bad. Retribution 2 set, more damage bonus on a Judgment of the Crusader. I went to check and it's about 32 bonus holy damage, so yeah, not exactly the best. The 4 set, more damage on Judgment of Command, take that Blood Elves and your fancy new seal. The 2 set, more heals from your Seal of Light, not bad, your whole raid will benefit from this. The 4 set, less cooldown on Divine Favour, again it's okay, a guarantee crit on a bit of a smaller cooldown. Tier 5, the Crystal Forge Armor. Protection 2 set, 50 more damage on Retribution Aura. Does that make it better than Sanctity for damage? I'm thinking that it won't, no. The 4 set is a big bonus to block after the first attack hitting your Holy Shield. Depends on the encounter, I suppose, niche use. The Ret 2 and 4 set are both not contributing much, let's put it like that. Maybe I'm underrating the group-wide heal. Holy, similar to Ret, doesn't seem great. 50 mana isn't anything to write home about, and a shorter Holy Light once per minute. Tier 6, Light Forge Armor. Thankfully, things turn around here, and there are some very nice bonuses to be had. The Prot 2 set, 10% more mana from Spiritual Attunement. I'm assuming this is a percentage of what Spiritual Attunement is baseline, that being 10, so this is a bonus 1% extra, though if it is a flat 10, that is insane, but if it's what I think it is, it's okay. The 4 set is 10% more damage on Consecration, which is amazing. This is your best spell for pretty much everything, and you will definitely want to get your hands on this. Retribution 2 set, some mana return on your melees, that's okay. The 4 set would be great if Hammer of Wrath didn't reset your swing timer. It still has a cast time, so it's not worth using as far as I'm aware. Holy 2 set, 5% more crit on Holy Light. This is again fantastic, it's your main heal. You're going to be stacking a huge amount of mana by tier 6, so this is really great. 4 set, more heals from Flash of Light. It's sort of outdone by Holy Light in TBC by this point though. So there we have it, a quick little rundown of the Paladin in TBC, but is it any better now? For all intents and purposes, yes. Protection is now a real tank thanks to the new abilities they get. Retribution are very much wanted as part of a raid group and have their place in Arena 2. Holy, I would say, struggle the most when compared to Classic. A 40% nerf on Illumination just isn't anything to gloss over. They can still do very well in raid content and have a few solid arena comps too. No doubt there's going to be a huge amount of people waiting to live the Ret dream without being a meme, and I'm kind of hoping that Prot being a proper tank now is going to be sort of like when Death Knights came out at the start of Wrath, where there was this sudden huge influx of new players who actually want to play a tank class and gear them up beyond the first few weeks. I mean, with how good they are at farming gold, it makes sense to have one as an alt as well. I'm personally planning to continue playing my Paladin as my main alt, however I'm making the swap over from Holy to Prot for sure. It looks like it's got a lot of potential and should be a fun class to play when I'm not on my main. That about wraps up the Paladin. Do let me know if I missed anything big out or that you would have liked to have seen included. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you in the next one very soon.